I remember that afternoon of December 23rd as clearly as if it were yesterday. The sky over Aurora was a dull gray, snow falling lightly like scattered fragments of broken memories. I, Adrian Westfall, 32 years old, a literature teacher living in Aurora, Colorado, was behind the wheel of my beat-up old Subaru driving nearly 6 hours north toward Lander, Wyoming. That day, I drove the long distance to the little log cabin where Grandma Sylvia had lived alone for the past 8 years, ever since Grandpa Dennis passed away. Highway 287 stretched out white and endless, flanked by snow-covered pine forests. Every now and then, a herd of deer would suddenly dart across my headlights, making my heart skip a beat. I hadn't visited Grandma in almost 4 months. 4 months filled with lesson plans, students, grading papers, faculty meetings, and then those late nights alone in my tiny apartment in Aurora, staring out the window at the falling snow, feeling utterly empty inside, until the phone call 5 days earlier. "Adrian, my dear grandson, you have to come home for Christmas, you hear me?" Her voice was still warm, but there was a slight tremble at the end of the sentence. "This Christmas, I have a special gift I want to give the whole family. Everyone has to be here. No one can be missing, do you understand?" My heart was pounding as I listened. It wasn't because of the gift. I just wanted to hug her, to smell the burning pine in the fireplace, the scent of baked apple pie, the smell of childhood. Grandma Sylvia was the only person left in the world who made me feel like I still had a real home. The car climbed higher into the mountains. The icy air seeped through the cracks around the windows. I played Judy Garland's "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" at low volume so it wouldn't drown out the frantic beating of my heart. The closer I got to Lander, the more I felt like the excited 10-year-old I once was. And then the cabin appeared. It was exactly as I remembered. A tiny 2-story log house with a red shingled roof covered in a thin, sparkling layer of frost. The chimney releasing delicate wisps of white smoke against the gray sky. The little Christmas tree on the porch was decorated by Grandma with handmade wooden ornaments and warm golden lights. From a distance, it looked like a glowing matchbox in the middle of a lonely winter. I parked the car, my heart racing. The front door was slightly ajar, golden light spilling out. I stepped onto the creaking wooden porch steps under a thin blanket of snow, carrying my bag of gifts, wanting nothing more than to rush inside. "Grandma, I'm home," I called softly, pushing the door open. The smell of pine, onion braised meat, and cinnamon cookies wafted over me so strongly I almost cried. There she was, sitting in the old armchair by the fireplace, her thin hands resting on her lap, wearing the same brown wool sweater she'd had since I was a child. Her hair was completely white now, but her eyes still sparkled like emeralds. She smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes softening. "Adrian, my grandson is home." I dropped to my knees in front of her chair and hugged her tightly. She was so tiny I could feel every rib beneath the thick sweater. The faint scent of lavender from her neck brought back memories of afternoons when she used to brush my hair as a little boy. "I'm sorry it's been so long," I whispered, my nose stinging with tears. "It's all right, I can wait," she said, stroking my hair with a hand that was cold yet strangely warm. "Sit down, dear. Let me pour you some tea. It was a long, cold drive, wasn't it?" The dining table was already set. A pristine white tablecloth, red candles, the silver cutlery Grandpa had bought back in 1980, and a clay pot of steaming carrot beef stew. Every detail showed she had been preparing since morning, maybe even since yesterday. She had done it all alone. I placed my Christmas gift bag on the table and pulled out a forest green sweater and a thick sheep's wool scarf. "Merry Christmas, Grandma." I smiled, a little embarrassed. She opened them, her eyes lighting up, and hugged the sweater to her chest like a child. "They're beautiful. I'll wear it tonight." She kissed my forehead. "Thank you, my dear grandson." We were still joyfully catching up after 4 months apart when the sound of a car in the yard startled me. Mom, Dad, and Zach had arrived. The door burst open and cold wind rushed in. Dad, Raymond, walked in first, wearing an expensive fur-lined coat, his face already scowling. Mom, Teresa, followed, stomping the snow off her boots and muttering something about terrible roads. My 29-year-old brother Zach had earbuds in, eyes glued to his phone. He gave Grandma a curt greeting and flopped onto the sofa. They hadn't brought any gifts, not even a flower, not a real hug. 10 minutes later, Uncle Albert, Aunt Joanna, and their daughter Peyton arrived. Uncle Albert complained about the cold the moment he stepped inside. Aunt Joanna glanced around the cabin as if it were filthy, and Peyton took selfies in front of the Christmas tree without even saying hello to Grandma. The atmosphere turned heavy from the very first minute. No one smiled genuinely. No one asked how Grandma was doing. They just sat there, waiting for dinner, waiting to leave. It broke my heart for her. Grandma kept smiling, slowly moving around to pour water and serve extra meat into everyone's bowls. But I could see the loneliness in her eyes. Dinner began. The clinking of silverware, the sound of chewing, dull conversation about gas prices, the new iPhone, Uncle Albert's upcoming vacation. No one mentioned Grandpa, who had passed away. No one asked if Grandma was healthy, if the roof still leaked, if the winter was too cold for her. Then Grandma stood up. Everyone fell silent as they watched her carry a thick stack of white envelopes, walking slowly around the table as if performing a ritual. She placed one envelope in each person's hand. Dad, Mom, Uncle Albert, Aunt Joanna, Zach, Peyton, and finally me. "Here are your Christmas gifts," she said, her voice soft but clear. People exchanged confused looks. A few whispers rose. "What is this?" Zach leaned toward Peyton and muttered, curiosity mixed with mockery in his voice. I held the envelope, feeling the thick, smooth paper beneath my fingers, my heart pounding like a war drum. I opened it slowly, gently peeling back the glue, and slid out the paper inside. It was a check. First National Bank of Wyoming. Pay to the order of Adrian James Westfall. Amount, $5 million US. The numbers and letters were printed clearly, professionally, without a single smudge. I looked up abruptly, my breath catching in my throat as if someone had punched me in the chest. The others opened their envelopes almost simultaneously. The chaotic rustling of paper filled the room, followed by 3 seconds of deathly silence. 3 seconds that felt like the whole world had stopped spinning. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the check in their hands. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then suddenly everyone burst into laughter like a bomb exploding at the dinner table. "Oh my God, Grandma!" Zach was the first to lose it, clutching his stomach and laughing so hard tears streamed down his face, waving his check like a cheap paper fan. His face was red, eyes squinted shut, mouth wide open. $5 million? Where did you print these, Grandma? They look so professional. Did you use Uncle Albert's color printer? Or did you hack the bank?" He shrieked with laughter, punching Peyton's shoulder, his voice high-pitched with excitement and mockery, as if this were the funniest joke of the year. Peyton laughed along, her shrill giggle ringing like breaking glass, her face flushed with shallow delight. She held her check up in front of her and snapped a photo with her phone right there at the table, the flash blinding everyone. "Granda gave us fake checks for Christmas, iconic," she said between laughs, fingers flying across the screen to post it on her Instagram story, eyes gleaming with superficial amusement. "Oh my God, $5 million. Grandma, are you a secret billionaire? I'm totally posting this. My friends are gonna die laughing." She waved the check in Grandma's face like it was a cheap toy, her face contorted from laughing too hard, completely oblivious to the seriousness in Grandma's eyes. Aunt Joanna's laugh was more sarcastic, sharp and grating like shattering glass, her face wrinkled around the mouth with obvious skepticism and contempt. She held the check between 2 fingers, lifting it close to her eyes as if inspecting counterfeit money. Then turned to Grandma with a biting tone. "Mom, come on, stop joking. You still have to ask Adrian for money to fix the roof, and now you suddenly have a fortune to give each of us $5 million? Give it up, Mom. What kind of weird joke is this? Do you think we're little kids?" She shook her head, glancing at Uncle Albert for support, her face red from trying to suppress laughter but dripping with mockery, as if Grandma were a senile old woman putting on a clown show. My father didn't laugh loudly, but he shook his head vigorously, his scowl showing clear irritation and disappointment. He glanced at the check, then tore it into 4 pieces without hesitation, the sharp ripping sound cutting through everyone else's laughter. He tossed the scraps onto the table. They fluttered down like paper snow, and sighed heavily. "What kind of joke is this, Mom? I drove 6 hours to have Christmas dinner, not to watch this nonsense. Did you think we'd find it funny?" His face flushed with anger, eyes avoiding Grandma's, as if he were embarrassed for her, though deep down it was obvious disappointment. He had hoped for something real, not a worthless piece of paper. My mother was quieter, but her face went pale with shock before settling into an awkward smile. She turned the check over a few times, blinking in disbelief, then whispered to Dad, "Raymond, she's probably just joking, but it does look pretty professional." She didn't tear hers up, but she didn't keep it carefully either. She simply set it down on the table like something unnecessary, her expression a mixture of confusion and disappointment. I alone remained silent in the chaos. I sat there, the check still untouched in my hand, my thumb gently tracing the words, $5 million. My heart was pounding wildly, my breathing rapid, as if my entire body were trembling with an unnamed premonition. I looked at Grandma. She stood there, hands clasped tightly in front of her stomach, back slightly bent with age, but her eyes burning brightly as they looked straight into mine. She wasn't smiling. She offered no explanation. There was not the slightest hint of jest in her gaze, only a chilling seriousness and a deep, aching sadness I had never seen before, as if she were looking straight through my soul and into the chaotic future that was about to unfold. Dinner ended amid mocking laughter and the shredded pieces of checks fluttering down onto the wooden floor like confetti from a cruel joke. One by one, everyone hurried out, as if the cabin had suddenly become too cramped, too cold, too shabby for them. I stood there, the check still intact in my hand, watching Grandma quietly clear the dishes. The wind howled across the snowy yard, car doors slammed, engines roared to life and then faded away down the trail. Only the 2 of us remained. "Grandma," I called softly, my voice cracking. "Can I stay a few more days? I took an extra week off from teaching. I want to be with you." She paused, turned, and looked at me. For the first time that evening, a real light flickered in her old eyes, like a flame suddenly fanned back to life. "Really, dear?" She smiled, the first genuine smile of the whole night. "Of course you can stay. This house. It's been a long time since anyone stayed past Christmas." I nodded, a weight lifting from my chest. When the sound of the last car finally disappeared, the cabin seemed to let out a long, relieved breath. The noisy crowd was gone, leaving behind the familiar quiet I loved so much it hurt. The crackle of logs in the fireplace, the low bubbling of the old copper kettle on the wood stove, the soft whistle of wind through the window cracks. All of it soothed my mind in a way nothing else ever could. The house belonged to just the 2 of us again. The next morning, daylight came late because of the heavy snow. I woke early, made coffee, and quietly started cleaning up. Grandma sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea, watching me wash the leftover dishes from the night before. Hot, soapy steam rose in clouds. The faint smell of last night's stew still lingered. I washed slowly, as if trying to stretch every minute. "Let me do it," she said, but I shook my head and smiled. "No, today let me take care of you." When the kitchen was done, I went outside to shovel snow. It had fallen all night, blanketing the porch steps, the walkway, even the rose bushes Grandma had planted when Grandpa was still alive. I grabbed the long-handled snow shovel and dug in hard. Snow flew in powdery bursts. Grandma stood on the porch in the green sweater I'd given her, holding her second cup of tea, eyes shining as she watched. "You're so strong," she praised. "Your grandpa used to clear the snow just like that every winter morning." I laughed, my breath coming out in white puffs. When the yard was finished, I restacked the firewood along the side of the house, the dry pine logs she had split herself last fall. My hands grew rough from the cold, but my heart was warm. She brought out Grandpa's old wool mittens and insisted I wear them. "Don't let your hands freeze, grandson." I checked the roof. Snow had piled nearly half a meter thick in places. I climbed the ladder and pushed it down in heavy slabs. Grandma stood below, anxiously looking up, handing me a towel to wipe the sweat even though the air was knife cold. "Come down, dear, it's dangerous." "I'm fine, Grandma. I'm used to it." I laughed loudly, my voice echoing in the crisp air. At noon, I fixed the squeaky kitchen door hinge, oiled it, tightened the screws. She sat beside me, passing me each tiny screw, then brewed a pot of hot ginger tea and set it next to me. The sharp ginger scent filled my nose and brought back memories of every childhood cold when she made me drink it. In the afternoon, the living room light started flickering. I stood on a chair to replace the bulb. Grandma held the ladder with trembling hands but still smiled. "Be careful, you little old man." That night, the kitchen sink pipe froze. I took her old hairdryer, sat on the floor, and blew hot air onto the copper pipe. She sat beside me and pressed a still warm slice of apple pie into my hand. "Eat this, keep your belly warm." Every moment moved slowly, strangely peaceful. The little cabin seemed to open its arms wide and wrap us both inside. No more mocking laughter, no more judgmental glances, only the glow of the fireplace and love that didn't need words. Evenings were the most beautiful. We pulled our 2 armchairs closer to the fire. Grandma toasted bread on a long iron fork, slathering it with melted butter and wild honey. I simmered vegetable soup from the garden, carrots, potatoes, onions she had stored in the root cellar since autumn. Some nights she baked apple pie. The scent of cinnamon and baked apples filled the house, sweet enough to break your heart. We ate dinner at the small wooden table right beside the fireplace. No chandelier needed, just the dancing firelight. Then she began telling stories. "When you were tiny, you used to run around this yard like a squirrel. Once you fell face first into the snow and wailed. I had to rush out, pick you up, wipe your nose, and I could barely stop laughing." I laughed out loud. "I remember. I used to pretend I was an astronaut and wear a frying pan as a helmet." She laughed in her raspy voice, eyes glistening. "Then your grandpa took you fishing at the old lake. You both came back soaked to the bone but proudly holding the tiniest perch, showing it off to the whole neighborhood. Grandpa said, 'This boy is going to do great things, mark my words.'" I fell silent, throat tight. Grandpa had been gone 8 years, yet every time she spoke of him, he came back to life inside these walls. "What I remember most is standing on the porch every winter, listening for the sound of a car," she said softly, her voice trembling like it might dissolve into the cold wind. "Sometimes it was just a neighbor, but I'd still run out to look. I know the sound of your engine so well. I can tell from far away when it's you coming home." She placed her thin, warm hand on my shoulder. That light touch was enough to make my heart ache. "Now that you're here, this house feels warm again." Sometimes she sat staring into the flames, her gaze distant, as if touching memories I could never reach. I knew she was thinking something deep, but she would only squeeze my shoulder gently and fall quiet again. No explanation, no complaints, just a whisper soft as glowing embers. "Having you here makes me so happy." I noticed how much weaker she had become. The last time I visited, she could still climb the ladder to pick apples. Now her steps were slow. She had to steady herself against the wall, walking from the kitchen to the living room. Her kind eyes sometimes clouded with fatigue. Once she coughed long and hard. When I asked worriedly, she waved it off. "Just old age, a winter cough, dear." I was even more grateful that I had stayed. Grateful for every single minute. In those days, I almost forgot about the $5 million check lying in my wallet. It was just paper. She was the real gold, the diamond, everything. The last day came far too quickly. Tuesday morning, the snow had stopped and the sky was an unbelievable clear blue. I packed my suitcase, my heart heavy. Grandma had been up since dawn, bundling a huge package of vegetables from the greenhouse. Bright red carrots, plump potatoes, a few onions, and a bunch of dried herbs. "Take these back to the city and eat well. I grew them clean, no chemicals." I held her for a long time on the porch. She looked so small in the green sweater and the thick scarf I'd given her, the mountain wind tossing her silver hair. I kissed her forehead, the The familiar scent of lavender stung my eyes. "I'll be back soon, Grandma, promise. Next month." She nodded, eyes red but still smiling. "Yes, I'll be waiting." I got in the car and rolled down the window to wave. She stood there, a tiny figure against the endless white forest, her scarf fluttering like a butterfly's wing. I drove away, looking back through the rearview mirror until she disappeared. I didn't know that was the last time I would ever see her standing there. I didn't know those peaceful days had been the final ones before the entire world I loved came crashing down. I got back to Aurora late in the afternoon. The city hadn't changed. Snow drifting lightly, streets packed, horns blaring. I unlocked the door to my third-floor apartment, tossed the suitcase into the corner, and collapsed onto the sofa. I was exhausted, but my heart still carried the warm scent of pine logs and Grandma's apple pie. I texted her, "I'm home safe, Grandma. Miss you so much." No blue tick. She'd probably left the phone in the kitchen again. The following days flew by like a gust of wind. I buried myself in work so I wouldn't overthink things. Then came Wednesday evening. I opened the suitcase to grab clothes for laundry, pulled out sweaters and socks, and there at the very bottom was the white envelope, its corner slightly curled from being pressed for days. I picked it up and chuckled to myself in the dark living room. $5 million. It really did look professional. The bank seal, Grandma's shaky but clear signature. I plopped down on the floor and kept turning the check over under the table lamp. Suddenly I remembered the look in her eyes on Christmas night. Why not give it a try? What do I have to lose? I muttered. The next morning I drove to the Chase branch near the school. I queued up as usual, the check inside the envelope in my hand, secretly laughing at myself. The teller is going to lose it when she sees this. When it was my turn, a very young teller named Mia, according to her name tag, greeted me with a professional smile. "Hi, sir. How can I help you today?" I slid the envelope through the slot. I'd like to deposit this." She opened it, glanced down, then snapped her head up and stared at me, eyes wide. She looked back at the check, this time for much longer. I started to feel embarrassed, my face burning. "Could you wait just a moment, sir?" She stood and disappeared inside. 15 minutes later, a middle-aged man in a gray suit and gold-rimmed glasses came out, holding my check like it was a live grenade. "Mr. Westfall?" He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "I'm Brian, the branch manager. Could you step into my office, please?" I swallowed hard and followed him, a bad feeling creeping in. In the private room, he placed the check on the desk and slid a receipt toward me. "This check appears to be valid. It was drawn on an account at First National Bank of Wyoming. The signature matches, the routing numbers are correct. We'll hold the check and run additional verification. For an amount this size, the process takes 2 to 5 business days. If everything clears, the funds will be deposited into your account this week." I nodded like a bobblehead, my throat dry. "Yes, thank you." Walking out of the bank, I still couldn't believe what I'd just heard. $5 million. My hands shook on the steering wheel the whole drive home. I had to pull over once before I trusted myself to keep driving. 2 days later, Friday. I was in the teacher's lounge grading tests while colleagues chatted and laughed around me. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A notification from the banking app. "Your account has been credited $5 million. I shot to my feet. The chair crashed backward, the noise loud enough that everyone turned to stare. Ignoring them, I bolted into the hallway, hands trembling as I opened the app. The screen glowed. $5 million. I froze in the middle of the corridor, heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Students passing by gave me strange looks. Joy, shock, then suddenly a chill ran down my spine. I rushed into the bathroom, slammed the stall door, and dialed Grandma. Ring, ring, no answer. I called again, a third time. Nothing but empty echo from the other end. She must be out in the garden, I told myself, or napping, or left the phone inside. Calm down. I took a deep breath and called my parents. "Hello? It's me." "Yeah, what?" Dad's curt voice. I cashed Grandma's check. "It's real, Mom, Dad. $5 million. It's already in my account." 1 second of silence. Then Dad burst out laughing, a scornful, dismissive laugh. "Stop kidding around, Adrian. I tore mine up on Christmas Day. There's no way she had $5 million. You're being childish." Mom snatched the phone. "Adrian, are you dreaming? Stop making up stories for attention. I'm tired of these games." I swallowed and called Zach. "Hello, bro." He sounded half asleep. "Zach, the check Grandma gave us on Christmas. Do you still have it?" "Huh, that piece of paper. I threw it away somewhere. Why are you calling so early?" "I took mine to the bank, and it's real. $5 million just hit my account." Zach yawned loudly. "Yeah, real funny, man. Don't bother me, I'm going back to sleep." Click. I didn't give up. I called Uncle Albert. He roared with laughter on the line. "A Christmas fairy tale, kid? Don't make me laugh." Aunt Joanna was harsher. "Adrian, stop bringing up that check to mess with us. There's no way your grandmother had that kind of money. We threw ours in the trash ages ago." I went numb. Everyone thought I was lying. Only Peyton was left. She picked up, voice syrupy sweet. "Hey, cousin, why are you calling so early?" "Peyton, do you still have the check Grandma gave you?" "Yeah, I kept it as a souvenir. It looked pretty legit, actually. Take it to a bank and try to cash it." I just did. $5 million really went into my account." Peyton giggled. "Are you pranking me? Gotta go, bye." I thought she'd just ignore me, but the next morning at 8 a.m. my phone rang. "Peyton. Adrian, how dare you trick me like that?" Her voice was shrill, almost hysterical. "I took that check to the bank this morning and they said the account is empty. Do you think this joke is funny?" I froze. My heart dropped to the floor. "Peyton, I'm not joking. I got the money for real. I can send you the screenshot. Don't lie to me. I hate you." She hung up. I sat down hard on the kitchen floor, hands shaking uncontrollably. What the hell was going on? I had received the money 2 days ago. How could the account suddenly be empty? I called Grandma again. Still no answer. 10th time. 20th time. Nothing. A cold dread crawled from the base of my neck down my spine. I glanced at the clock. 9:12 a.m. She was always up by 6 to light the fireplace. Why hadn't she answered the phone in days? I threw a few changes of clothes into a backpack, grabbed my wallet and car keys, and bolted out of the apartment without even locking the door. On Highway 287, snow started falling in big, heavy flakes that smacked against the windshield like invisible hands trying to hold me back. I drove faster than usual, knuckles white on the steering wheel, radio off, only the frantic thud of my heart filling the silence. Those 6 hours felt like an entire lifetime. I called Grandma again and again, no answer. I called old Jim, the neighbor who used to split firewood for her, no answer. A crushing dread pressed down on my chest. I prayed she was just sleeping deeply, mildly sick, or that her phone had simply died. But deep inside, I already knew something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. When I finally turned onto the snow-covered dirt road leading to the cabin, dusk had fallen. The headlights swept across the pine forest and the blinding white ground. The cabin appeared silent and abandoned like a forgotten painting. No smoke rose from the chimney. No warm golden light spilled from the porch. Only darkness and a deathly cold. I skidded to a crooked stop, leapt out and ran up the steps, slipping on ice. My keys clattered to the ground. I had to kneel to pick them up, hands shaking violently. The door was unlocked. I shoved it open. A blast of icy air rushed in with me. The cabin was freezing, as if the fireplace had been dead for days. "Grandma?" My voice echoed, lost among the wooden walls. No reply. Only the wind howling outside and my heart pounding like war drums. I walked slowly toward her bedroom, terrified of startling her. The door was ajar. I pushed it gently. She was lying there. Blanket pulled up to her chest, hands neatly folded on her stomach, face peaceful as if lost in the deepest, sweetest sleep. Silver hair spread across the white pillow, lips slightly curved in what looked like a faint smile for a beautiful dream. Relief flooded me. I nearly cried. She was only sleeping, must be exhausted. "Grandma," I whispered, stepping closer, gently tugging the blanket higher to keep her warm. Her hand was exposed. I reached to tuck it in and froze. Cold. Ice cold. Not the cold of winter, but the cold of someone already gone. Trembling, I touched her cheek, still cold. I pressed my hand to her chest, no rise and fall. I laid my ear against her heart, no beat. In a single second, my entire world collapsed. "Grandma! Grandma, no! Please, no!" I screamed, voice shattering, shaking her, hugging her, kissing her forehead, tears pouring down onto her face, but she remained still, serene, as if she had simply been waiting for me to come home so she could say goodbye. I don't remember dialing 911. I only remember sitting beside the bed, clutching her hand, sobbing until my throat was raw. The paramedics arrived, 2 men in reflective jackets, faces grave. They checked her pulse, shone a light into her eyes, then one gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. She's been gone for probably 3 or 4 days. 3 or 4 days. Since the morning I left. She had lain here alone in this freezing house waiting for me, and I never knew." I collapsed to the floor, held her one last time, and cried until there were no tears left. Later, after they had taken her away, the cabin felt terrifyingly empty. I sat on the living room floor numb when I noticed a white envelope placed neatly on the dining table, exactly where she used to sit and pour my tea every morning. On the outside, in her familiar trembling handwriting, "For Adrian." I picked it up. My hands felt like lead. Inside was a long letter on the lined paper she always used, written slowly but clearly. I read it, each word squeezing my heart until I could barely breathe. "My dearest Adrian, by the time you read this, I will have gone to be with your grandfather again. Please don't cry too much, my sweet boy. I have lived a full life and I am content. The $5 million you received is everything your grandfather and I saved and invested throughout our entire lives. The nights he stayed up studying stocks, the winters I mended clothes instead of buying new ones, the trips we never took so we could leave something for our children and grandchildren. This past Christmas, I did it on purpose. I wanted to test everyone's hearts. I knew I didn't have much time left, so I needed to see who still remembered family, who still truly cherished me. I wrote a check for each person, but the account held exactly $5 million, enough for only one check to clear. Whoever cashed theirs first would receive everything. Anyone who came after would simply be told insufficient funds. And I believed you would be the first to try. You didn't laugh, you didn't tear it up, you didn't throw it away. You are the only one who still held on to family. I am so proud of you. Use that money to live well, Adrian. Live for yourself. Don't live to please others, and don't let anyone force you to share if you don't want to. You deserve it more than anyone. My only regret is that I didn't get to hug you one more time. But I will always be here, in this cabin, in the smell of apple pie, in the crackle of the fireplace, in the Wyoming mountain wind. I love you so much. Forever, your Grandma Sylvia. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest, and sobbed like a child. The cabin now felt both warm and suffocatingly cold at once. Warm because she was still in every brick, every log. Cold because she was truly gone. I sat there a very long time until night fell completely. Then, hands still trembling, I picked up the phone and called each family member. First, my parents. "Hello?" Dad's curt voice. "Mom, Dad, Grandma passed away." Silence. No cry, no gasp, nothing. Just heavy silence, then a dry, "Yeah," followed immediately by, "So, is there a will? Did she leave anything?" I hung up, unable to speak. I called Zach. He just said, "Oh," then asked, "So, you really got the $5 million?" I called Uncle Albert, Aunt Joanna, Peyton, same reaction from all of them. No grief, no sorrow, only calculating silence followed by questions about money, the house, the land, the estate. I sat on the cold floor clutching Grandma's letter, crying until my eyes were dry. I had no idea that from this moment on, the family I once thought was bound by blood would descend into the ugliest, most vile chaos they had ever created. And this time I would no longer be the quiet, obedient grandson. 2 days later, Grandma's funeral was held on a bleak Wednesday morning. Snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the small cemetery behind the old Lutheran church in downtown Lander in a pure, unbroken white. I had been standing at the church door since early morning wearing the only black suit I owned, the shirt collar stiff with cold. I greeted each mourner, shook hands, accepted condolences, but my eyes kept drifting to the simple pine coffin placed in the center aisle, the cheapest one available, because I knew Grandma hated ostentation. The neighbors came in large numbers. Old Jim brought a bundle of wildflowers tied with twine. Mary from the bakery hugged me and sobbed uncontrollably. Grandma's old friends from the quilting club, the church circle, the ones who had known Grandpa, they all came, quietly filling every creaky wooden pew. They cried real tears. I hugged them, and I cried real tears too. My family arrived late. Mom, Dad, and Zach walked in just as the church bells struck 10. Dad wore an expensive gray suit and a perfectly straight tie, but his face was as cold as if he were attending a board meeting. Mom had huge sunglasses on despite the gray sky, lips pressed tight, clutching a Chanel handbag. Zach stood with his hands in his pockets, one AirPod dangling. They didn't hug me. They just nodded slightly and went straight to the front row. Uncle Albert and Aunt Joanna were almost half an hour late. Their shiny black SUV screeched to a halt outside. The slamming doors echoed down the empty street. Aunt Joanna wore a mink coat and silk scarf. As she wiped snow off her high heels, she whispered loudly to Uncle Albert, "I wonder how much Mom actually left. Hopefully enough to cover my credit card debt." I heard every word. My fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms until they bled. That was the moment I understood. To them, Grandma had only ever been money on legs. The service began. The pastor read from the Bible, his warm voice rising above the steady patter of snow on the roof. Then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the pulpit, hands trembling around the crumpled piece of paper I had gripped too tightly. My grandmother was the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. My voice broke. She taught me what unconditional love looks like, what it means to live kindly no matter how harsh life becomes. In her final days, I was lucky enough to be with her, to light the fire for her, to listen to her old stories, to see her smile. That was the greatest gift of my life. I spoke about the sweater I'd knitted for her, about our simple dinners of vegetable soup and toasted bread, about that last hug on the porch. Tears fell onto the wooden pulpit. Down below, many wiped their eyes. But in the family pew, Zach was secretly checking his phone. Uncle Albert was whispering something to Dad, and their glances at each other were loaded with meaning. I bowed my head, unable to go on. After the burial, as Grandma's coffin was lowered into the ground amid the swirling snow, the mourners quietly left. Only my family was asked to stay in the small wooden hall behind the church, a room that smelled of pine and weak coffee. Attorney Howard Grant was already waiting. In his 60s, snow-white hair, impeccable black suit, gold-rimmed glasses, he spoke slowly but firmly. He set his briefcase on the table, opened it, and took out a thick folder. "As per the final wishes of Sylvia Westfall, I will now read her last will and testament." The room went dead silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Every pair of eyes sharpened instantly, gleaming like hounds catching a scent. Mr. Grant cleared his throat. All of Sylvia Westfall's assets, totaling exactly $5 million, were transferred by her into a special account before Christmas. On Christmas night, she issued a $5 million check to each of her children and grandchildren. However, that account contained exactly $5 million, meaning only the first check presented for payment would receive the full amount. Any subsequent checks would find the account empty. He paused, looking around the room. And according to my investigation, the first person to deposit their check was Mr. Adrian James Westfall. Therefore, in accordance with Sylvia's explicit wishes, the entire estate now belongs to Adrian. 3 seconds of deathly silence. Then the room exploded. No way. What? All 5 million to him? That little bastard tricked her? This is impossible. Dad shot to his feet, face crimson. Uncle Albert slammed the table. Mom and Aunt Joanna shrieked in unison. Zach sat open-mouthed, then turned to me with blazing eyes. Peyton hissed, "You cheating jerk," loud enough for everyone to hear. They descended on me like a pack of wolves. "You son of a bitch! You brainwashed my mother!" Dad roared, jabbing a finger in my face. "Hand over the money. That belongs to the whole family," Uncle Albert growled. "Adrian, be a good boy and split it with your aunt and uncle, half and half." Aunt Joanna cooed, grabbing my sleeve. "Do you even know how much debt I'm in, you selfish prick?" Zach shouted. I stood in the middle of that circle, heart pounding, but I wasn't shaking anymore. I looked at them, my own flesh and blood, and felt nothing but strangers. Mr. Grant tapped the table calmly. "Everyone, please. This is Sylvia's clear, legal, notarized wish. No one can contest it." No one listened. They kept screaming, pointing, accusing me of deceiving an old woman, manipulating her, pretending to be the good grandson just to steal everything. I looked at them once more. Then I spoke, quietly but clearly enough to silence the room for a single second. "I have received Grandma's $5 million, and I am keeping every cent. I will not give a single penny to any of you. That was her wish. She wrote it clearly in the letter she left me. She chose me, not you, because I was the only one who still visited her, the only one who truly loved her." The room froze for one heartbeat. Then the chaos erupted again, louder, uglier. Dad swore. Uncle Albert threatened to sue. Mom wailed about everything she'd sacrificed raising me. Zach lunged as if to hit me. I didn't wait. I turned and walked out, leaving behind the shouting, the hateful glares, and the air thick with the stench of greed. Outside, snow was still falling, covering the cemetery, covering Grandma's fresh grave in pure white. I stood alone in the storm, face turned to the sky, letting the icy flakes melt on my skin. "Grandma, I'm sorry you had to see this," I whispered. The cold wind carried my tears into the falling snow. And I knew from that day forward I no longer had a family. Only me, Grandma's $5 million, and the promise to live decently just as she asked. I drove back to Aurora that very night, not staying in Lander a single second longer. The highway was pitch black. Headlights swept across endless stretches of snow, only the crunch of tires on ice and the furious pounding of my heart breaking the silence. I thought everything had ended in that church hall, but no, that was only the beginning. Just 3 days later, the story. Adrian Westfall steals $5 million from his own grandmother. Had spread like a virus across family social media and beyond. It started with Zach, my own flesh and blood brother. He posted a status. "Some people pretend to be the dutiful grandson who visits Grandma all the time, but behind her back they manipulate a frail old woman to seize the entire inheritance. One greedy grandson just tore our family apart." Then came my mother with a long crocodile tear post. "I gave birth to you, raised you, and this is how you repay your mother? Grandma dies and you keep every penny for yourself, living the high life alone. Heaven has eyes, son." Aunt Joanna spammed her stories. Old photos of Grandma with captions like, "Grandma, can you see this? The favorite grandson you loved most just robbed all your grandchildren blind." Uncle Albert wrote a full public post tagging the entire extended family. My mother was brainwashed by one grandson who forced her to sign papers before she died. Now he's taken all $5 million and won't give anyone a cent. Where is justice? And my father, the man who once taught me that family comes first, posted a short video from inside his car, face red with rage. I never thought the son I raised would turn into a daylight robber. He exploited a weak, elderly woman, tricked her into transferring everything to him. My mother had severe Alzheimer's and he hid it, forced her to sign checks. Now she's gone and he's disappeared with the money. I will sue him to the end. That video was shared over 300 times in a single night. I sat in my dark apartment scrolling, hands shaking uncontrollably. The comments underneath were like knife blows. Fake nice guy. You can see the greed on his face. Unfilial grandson. Sue him, uncle. Get justice for the family. Some even tagged my school, my colleagues, old friends. The next morning I dragged myself to work, legs heavy as lead. The atmosphere had changed completely. Colleagues who used to greet me warmly now looked away and whispered behind my back. In the teacher's lounge, I clearly heard, "They say Adrian stole his grandma's entire inheritance. He seemed so nice, but so greedy. You really can't trust anyone." One senior student even asked in front of the whole class, "Sir, is it true you stole all your grandma's money?" The class burst out laughing. I stood frozen at the lectern, bitterness choking my throat. That afternoon, the principal called me in. She gave an awkward smile. "Adrian, I know you're going through some family difficulties. The school doesn't want to get involved, but several parents have messaged asking questions. Could you give a brief explanation?" I told her everything, voice trembling, that it was my grandmother's explicit wish, that I hadn't tricked anyone. She nodded, but her eyes were full of pity. "Please understand, the school just wants everything calm." I left her office feeling like a criminal. My mental state plummeted. I lost my appetite, couldn't sleep, woke up drenched in sweat at 3 a.m. every night hearing Grandma calling me in the cold wind. I lost weight, dark circles under my eyes, stood in front of classes with my mind miles away. Messages from the family poured in like a storm. "Zach, you dog, drop dead." Mom, "Son, please give Mom just a little. I'm drowning in bank debt." Aunt Joanna, "Heaven will punish you, just wait." Dad, "I disown you." Calls at midnight, while cooking, while driving, nothing but cursing, begging, threats. One Friday afternoon I finished class late, drove home in a sleepless fog. On the third floor I found a thick golden envelope placed neatly in front of my door, glaring red quartz seal. I sank to the hallway floor and tore it open with shaking hands. The first words made my blood run cold. Summons to court. Plaintiffs, Raymond Westfall and Albert Westfall. Defendant, Adrian James Westfall. Then the accusations, one after another like stab wounds: fraudulent appropriation of inheritance, exploitation of a vulnerable elderly person lacking mental capacity, violation of family ethics, demand to void the bank transaction and redistribute assets according to lawful inheritance ratios. At the end, the line that choked me: they wanted the money divided into 8 equal shares, 1 for each person, including Peyton. I sat in the freezing hallway, the envelope falling from my hand, cradling my head. I couldn't even cry anymore. I felt hollow, as if the entire world had turned its back on me. They invented Alzheimer's, claimed I forced her to sign papers, that I mentally manipulated her in her final days. Every lie wrapped in official legal paperwork, signed by my own father and uncle. The betrayal cut to the bone. The people who gave me life, who shared my blood, were willing to drag their own mother's, their own grandmother's honor through the mud for money. I lay on the floor all night, lights off, clutching Grandma's letter, reading it over and over until it was creased and worn. Live for yourself. Don't let anyone force you. Near dawn, I sat up. I wasn't shaking anymore. Only one cold, clear thought remained. If I don't fight back, they will dance on her grave for the money. I opened my contacts, found an old number from high school days. Micah, my best friend back then, now a well-known litigation attorney in Denver specializing in messy inheritance cases. I called at 5 a.m. He picked up immediately. "Adrian, what's wrong, bro?" I told him everything, no detail spared. Grandma's handwritten letter, her final days, the will reading, the smear campaign, the summons. Silence for a second. Then Micah, voice hard as steel. I'm taking this case. Not for money, I'm doing it pro bono. I'll make them choke on every word they've said. 3 days later, we met at our old college cafe. Micah was tall, sharply dressed, eyes burning with resolve. I handed over every document. Grandma's letter, bank transfer receipts, the original check scan, Mr. Grant's confirmation, medical records proving she was fully lucid, her doctor certified no Alzheimer's, even neighbor Jim's security footage of her laughing and healthy just days before Christmas. Micah read Grandma's letter and his eyes welled up. Your grandma was an incredible woman, he said quietly. I'll make them regret ever touching her final wish. We began preparing for legal war. Micah filed counterclaims, defamation, slander, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We collected every post, every comment, every threatening message. We gathered evidence of her mental clarity, bank records, Mr. Grant's testimony, the diary she kept in her final days that I found in her desk drawer. This was no longer about money. This was about defending the honor of a woman who spent her whole life loving a family that never deserved her. I looked out the cafe window as snow began to fall again. Grandma, I whispered in my heart, I won't let them win. The battle had only just begun. The first court hearing fell on a bitterly cold April morning in Lander, Wyoming. The Fremont County Courthouse was an old red brick building with a roof still patched with half-melted snow. Local media had no idea the case existed, no reporters, no cameras, yet the public gallery was packed. My family had dragged in distant relatives, old neighbors, even random Facebook acquaintances just to watch the show. They squeezed together behind the plaintiff's bench, whispering loudly, eyes gleaming like they were waiting for the season finale of a soap opera. I sat on the defendant's side next to Micah. He wore a navy suit, tie perfectly straight, face calm and icy. I was wearing the same black suit from Grandma's funeral, fingers gripping the edge of the wooden bench until my knuckles went white. On the plaintiff's side, my father sat in the center, scowling. To his right was Uncle Albert, top 2 shirt buttons undone, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. To his left was my mother, wearing huge sunglasses indoors, clutching a tissue like she was about to burst into tears. Zach sat beside her, earbuds dangling, glaring at me with pure hatred. Aunt Joanna and Peyton were in the row behind, whispering nonstop. The judge entered, Helen Carter, a woman in her mid-50s with short silver hair and a voice sharp as a blade. She banged the gavel. The room fell silent. The plaintiff's attorney, a short, overweight man named Richard Doyle, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold, stood first. My clients, the biological children and grandchildren of Sylvia Westfall, have been unjustly deprived of their rightful inheritance by the defendant, Adrienne Westfall. The defendant exploited the trust of an elderly woman, mentally manipulated her, and coerced her into transferring the entirety of her $5 million estate to himself through a fraudulent check scheme. He paused, shot me a reproachful look, and continued. In her final stage of life, Sylvia Westfall was no longer of sound mind. She suffered from severe Alzheimer's disease. She frequently confused the names of her own children and grandchildren and sometimes failed to recognize her own son. Issuing $5 million checks to multiple individuals was irrational and abnormal behavior, clearly demonstrating severe psychological influence and legal incapacity. He presented his evidence. A few photos of Grandma looking thin from last year, some old family group chat messages, and my father's sworn statement that my mother was very forgetful. Once she even called me Dennis, my late father's name. Micah sat motionless, not taking a single note, just giving me the slightest nod. Let them dig their own grave. Then it was Micah's turn. He rose slowly like a panther about to strike. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I will now present evidence proving that every single accusation made by the plaintiffs is fabricated, defamatory, and a grave insult to the deceased. He placed a thick folder on the table. First, Grandma's handwritten letter to me, her shaky but clear script. When he read the line, You are the only one who still remembered family. The entire room went quiet. My mother looked down. Zach, my own brother, bit his lip. Next, neighbor Jim's security footage shot from his yard toward Grandma's, showing her healthy, chopping wood herself, laughing and chatting loudly. November medical records stating she was fully lucid with no cognitive decline. Attorney Howard Grant's sworn statement that she visited his office 3 times before Christmas alone and signed every document herself. Finally, the bank records. The account contained exactly $5 million, and I was the only person who deposited a check before the funds were depleted. Micah closed with a sentence that silenced the courtroom. The plaintiffs have not produced one shred of concrete evidence that the defendant coerced or manipulated Sylvia Westfall. On the contrary, we have irrefutable proof that during the 8 years Sylvia lived alone, not one of the plaintiffs visited her more than twice a year, sent financial support, or even called to check on her health. The only person who regularly drove 6 hours to repair her roof, split firewood, cook meals, and stay with her in her final days was the defendant, Adrian James Westfall. Judge Carter gavelled once more. Having reviewed all documents and testimony, this court finds that the will and final wishes of Sylvia Westfall were made while she was of completely sound mind, legally valid and binding. The bank transaction involving the check was lawful. There exists no credible evidence whatsoever that defendant Adrian Westfall engaged in coercion or manipulation. After a heavy pause, her voice rang out, final and decisive. Therefore, the court rules. 1. The plaintiff's entire lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. 2. Adrian James Westfall is recognized as the sole lawful heir to the $5 million estate. 3. The plaintiff shall bear all court costs and partially reimburse the defendant's legal fees. The gavel slammed down, one thunderous crack that echoed through the room. The plaintiff's side froze. My father shot to his feet, face purple, pointing at me. You'll regret this. Uncle Albert slammed the table so hard security warned him. My mother covered her face and cried, but no one believed those tears were real. Zach stormed out. I stayed seated. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I only felt exhaustion, bitterness, and a strange emptiness. Micah put a hand on my shoulder. It's over, bro. Your grandma's smiling down right now. I nodded, but the tears still fell. I walked out of the courthouse into the biting Wyoming dusk. Mountain wind howled, whipping the last late-season snowflakes across the steps. I stood on the top stair, face turned to the sky, letting the cold slap my cheeks. I had won the case. I had kept the $5 million. I had defended Grandma's honor. But I had also lost my family forever. And this time it didn't even hurt anymore. Just a cold, hollow space in my chest where my love for my parents, my brother, my aunt, and uncle used to be. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove out of Lander without looking back. Ahead lay the long white highway. Behind me, a past I would never return to. I whispered into the wind, "Grandma, I won. Now I'll live decently, just like you told me to." And I knew, even having won this battle, I was still the loneliest person in the world. I got back to Aurora well past midnight. I parked in front of the building, killed the engine, and sat in the darkness for a long time. My phone kept buzzing. Congratulatory texts from Micah, an invoice from Attorney Grant, and a few messages from unknown numbers I assumed were distant relatives. I turned it off, went inside, and collapsed onto the sofa without switching on the lights. I had won the case, but why did my heart still feel like it was carrying a ton of stone? The next morning, the news spread faster than I expected. A local Wyoming paper ran a short article. $5 million inheritance dispute ends. Court dismisses lawsuit, upholds deceased's will. No names were mentioned, but on social media that was more than enough. All the old posts from my parents, aunt, and uncle Zach and Peyton were dug up again, and this time public opinion turned 180 degrees. First, my parents. I had unfollowed them on Facebook long ago, but Micah sent me screenshots of the new comments. Relatives were openly criticizing them. One aunt wrote, "What kind of parents sue their own son over their own mother's inheritance money?" Unfilial doesn't even begin to describe it. Old neighbors in Wyoming, the ones who used to play cards with Grandma, posted stories. So ashamed on their behalf, jealous of their own child to the point of dragging him to court, and now that they lost, total silence. Longtime friends started cutting contact. I heard through a cousin that Dad had been kicked out of his weekly golf group because nobody wants family drama. Mom was suddenly excluded from the Saturday women's tea at church. People whispered, "Teresa? The one who sued her own son over Grandma's money?" Scary woman. Their job suffered too. Dad, a logistics manager, was called in by his boss and warned because of the inflammatory social media posts. "Raymond, the company doesn't want employees involved in personal scandals that hurt our image." He was formally reprimanded, and co-workers started avoiding him at lunch. Mom, a bank teller, now got sidelong glances from colleagues. Her once close co-worker barely said hello anymore, muttering that she heard Teresa sued her own son for $5 million. Terrifying. The rift between my parents and me became irreparable. They stopped calling, but I knew they were furious and deeply humiliated. From scattered messages, I heard that they fought nonstop. Mom sobbed and blamed Dad for pushing the lawsuit. Dad roared that it was our greedy son's fault. They lived in constant tension for weeks, sleepless, Dad drinking more, Mom staring out windows alone. I no longer felt pity, only sadness for two people who let greed blind them to family. Uncle Albert suffered the heaviest financial blow. The court ordered him to pay a substantial sum for filing a frivolous lawsuit, nearly $2,000 in court costs plus part of my legal fees. For a small business owner, that was devastating. His auto repair shop on the outskirts of Wyoming relied on local customers. Now they vanished. People talked. That's Albert Westphal, the one so greedy for his own mother's money he sued his own nephew to steal the inheritance. A parts supplier called. "Albert, I really don't want to get mixed up in this lawsuit mess. Let's pause our partnership." He lost 3 major contracts in the first week after the ruling. Finances collapsed fast. He had to sell his old pickup to cover bank debts, and the shop became deserted except for a few loyal customers out of pity. I pictured him sitting alone in the dark garage, beer in hand, face gaunt with worry. Greed had driven him to the edge. Aunt Joanna took the hardest social hit, the thing she valued most. She had been the queen of Peyton's school parent groups, local charity circles, and the fancy Wyoming social scene. Now her reputation lay in ruins. At parent meetings, people whispered behind her back, "There's Joanna, the one who spearheaded the lawsuit to split inheritance money with her husband's nephew." One mother posted in a group chat. Micah forwarded it to me. "Joanna always claimed she loved family above all. Well, the mask is off. Greedy scheming, tearing the family apart for cash." At the annual charity gala, a wealthy patron smirked. "Joanna, I heard you sued your nephew for Grandma's money. You really know how to keep up appearances." She was removed from the charity board to avoid scandal. Invitations dried up, neighbors stopped saying hello. Aunt Joanna retreated, posted far less, but I knew she was in agony. For her, reputation was worth more than money. Zach, my own brother, took a brutal hit to his personal reputation. A drunken video he recorded right after the trial, ranting, "My brother is a dog who stole all Grandma's money," was secretly filmed and spread among his friends. His college buddies, drinking crew, gym bros, everyone saw it. They distanced themselves. Zach is such a petty, selfish jerk, suing his own brother over an inheritance. His pretty marketing girlfriend broke up with him 2 weeks later. "I can't handle your family's insane drama anymore. Suing your own brother over Grandma's money? Disgusting." For the first time, Zach felt real shame. He sent me a few drunken late-night texts. "Bro, I messed up, but you were harsh too." Pride stopped him from facing me properly. Now he lives withdrawn, rarely goes out, looks hollowed out, and his sales job suffers because clients who heard the rumors avoid him. Peyton got off lightest, but still felt it. At college, her friends teased, "Peyton, you sued your cousin for Grandma's money. So badass." She lost a few friends, and her family princess image was tarnished. She posted far fewer stories, laughed less. I suspect she's actually reflecting on what she did. Inside the family, resentment exploded like a slow-motion bomb. My parents blamed Uncle Albert. "You pushed us into the lawsuit, now the whole family is disgraced." Uncle Albert blamed Aunt Joanna. "You kept crying and demanding a share." Aunt Joanna fired back, "You men were too weak to make a decision." Zach blamed everyone. "You dragged me into this, now I'm the one who lost friends and my girlfriend." Phone fights and group chat wars went on for weeks. The family no longer gathers. This Christmas there will definitely be no reunion. And they still messaged me, half apologies, half reproaches, half envy. "Dad, son, I was wrong, but you should think of your little brother too." "Mom, Adrian, Mom misses you so much. Just give me a little to pay off the debts, please." "Zach, you won. Happy now? I'm the one suffering." Aunt Joanna, "Nephew, I'm sorry I got carried away, but don't you feel guilty keeping everything?" I read them all, never replied, gradually blocked the numbers, deleted the group chats, and lived in my own silence. In the weeks after the trial, I sat alone in my apartment, watching the snow slowly melt outside, thinking of Grandma. They, the people who used to be my family, were now paying the price for their greed. I didn't gloat. I only felt a quiet, lingering sadness. But I knew this was the lesson Grandma wanted to teach. Real love is never about money. And I began to think about leaving everything behind. I spent the entire week after that sitting quietly in my little Aurora apartment, watching the snow melt into rivulets dripping from the roof across the street. Every morning I woke up, brewed a strong black coffee, sat at the kitchen table and reread Grandma's letter, her trembling handwriting still seeming to carry the warmth of her hand. Messages from the family kept coming, even though I had blocked almost every number. A few from unknown phones, voices mixed with apology and blame. "Adrian, son, we were wrong, but you still have to think about your family." Or from Zach, "Don't you feel guilty keeping all the money? I've lost all my friends because of this." I read them, then deleted them. No reply. Not out of hatred. The hatred was gone. I was simply exhausted. I realized that to heal I had to cut the cord completely. Not for revenge, but to protect myself from that endless cycle of accusations, blame, begging, and sarcasm. I started acting. First, I blocked every single contact. Mom, Dad, Uncle Albert, Aunt Joanna, Zach, Peyton, everyone. I deleted the family group chats, unfollowed them all on social media, and changed my phone number. It felt like cutting a noose from around my neck. No more midnight calls, no more smear posts, no more fake pleading. Only silence, real silence, for the first time in months of chaos. Work at school had become suffocating. Colleagues still whispered behind my back, "I heard Adrian's lawsuit is over. He won, but his family is destroyed." And their looks were no longer friendly, only curiosity and suspicion. Students, innocent but nosy, sometimes asked outright, "Sir, is it true you're super rich now? $5 million?" The whole class would burst out laughing while I forced a smile. "Just family stuff, guys. Let's focus on the lesson." But deep down I knew the peace here was gone. Every class felt like performing in a play. My mind was elsewhere, the old passion gone. I decided to quit. I handed in my resignation to the principal, citing personal reasons and the need for a break. She nodded sympathetically. "I understand, Adrian, but the school will miss you." I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I quietly wrapped things up, graded the last papers, and said goodbye to my students with a heavy heart. "Study hard, okay?" I said, my voice catching a little. One kid asked, "Where are you going, sir?" I smiled. Somewhere quieter. Back home, I started packing. This tiny apartment with its old sofa, wooden kitchen table, and shelves full of classic novels now felt like a prison. I packed everything into a few cardboard boxes. Clothes, books, a handful of photos with Grandma. Nothing extra. I didn't want to carry the past. I sold the old Subaru, bought a small pickup truck for the move. No one in the family knew where I was going. I left no note, made no farewell calls. I simply locked the door one last time, looked at the empty rooms and walked away. The $5 million sat almost untouched in my account. I had only used a small portion for legal fees and daily expenses. No luxury cars, no European vacations, no stock market gambling. My goal was to live simply, exactly as Grandma had asked. Live decently, live for yourself. $5 million wasn't for squandering. It was for building a new, honest life without the rat race. I drove north, along endless highways flanked by pine forests and rocky mountains. At first, I had no specific destination, just the need to get far away from Aurora, from Wyoming, from the painful memories. I stopped in small towns along the way, slept in cheap motels, ate roadside burgers and thought. Then I chose Montana, a remote little place called Willow Creek, nestled against the Rockies with a crystal-clear lake and endless pine forests. It reminded me most of Grandma, quiet, cold but warm in its own way, like her old cabin. I bought a modest log house on the edge of town, nothing grand. Red shingled roof, wide porch overlooking a wildflower yard, a little creek murmuring behind the house day and night. 3 rooms, a small kitchen with a wood-burning stove, a simple bedroom, and a study with wooden bookshelves. I repainted the walls myself, fixed the creaky hinges, planted wildflowers out front. Every hammer blow, every brush stroke felt like rebuilding myself. I applied at Willow Creek High. The town desperately needed teachers, so they hired me right after a short interview. You taught high school literature in Colorado? Perfect, we need someone like you. The principal smiled warmly and asked nothing about my past. I started the following week, 10th and 11th grade, American literature and creative writing. The kids here were straightforward and kind. They asked about Shakespeare and Hemingway, not about $5 million. They took to me quickly because I taught calmly and honestly. Mr. Westfall tells the best stories, one said. I smiled, warmth in my chest for the first time in months. My new life was simple but full of meaning. I woke at 6, brewed strong coffee in an old copper pot, sat on the porch watching the sun rise over the mountains, listening to birds instead of car horns. Then a 10-minute drive to school. 3 morning classes, chatting with students during breaks. Do you like writing stories? Go for it, I'll read them. Afternoons, home to cook something simple, vegetable soup from the garden, toast with local honey. Evenings by the fireplace reading The Great Gatsby or Thoreau's Walden or writing in my journal. Thoughts about Grandma, her final days, this new life. Sometimes I wrote letters to her knowing she'd never read them. Grandma, I'm living decently now. I miss you so much. Weekends were when I truly lived, hiking forest trails, boots crunching on pine needles, breathing air so clean it stung my lungs. Gardening, planting carrots and potatoes the way she taught me. Or visiting the little town market, buying fresh bread from the old baker, making small talk about the weather. No one knew who I was, they just knew me as the new teacher Westfall, quiet and kind. No lawsuits, no $5 million, no suspicious looks. Just Adrian, an ordinary teacher. For the first time in months, I felt peace. The first nights in Montana, I still woke up from nightmares. Courtrooms, my father's hateful glare, Grandma lying cold in the cabin. But gradually sleep grew deeper, dreams gentler. Grandma smiling by the fireplace, me running through the snowy yard as a child. I understood I wasn't running away, I was starting over. A real life, not one spent trying to please others, but lived for myself, exactly as she told me to. The $5 million still sits quietly in the bank, growing slowly in a safe savings fund. I've used only a little. The house, an old pickup for hauling firewood, and a small anonymous scholarship fund for needy students at school, from a friend. The rest is saved for retirement or perhaps to help someone who truly needs it the way Grandma always did. Every simple day here helps me understand more deeply what Grandma wrote in her letter. Live for yourself. I I still remember those trembling lines, the faint blue ink on lined paper like a whisper from the past. Living for myself, not to prove anything to anyone, not to chase luxury cars or mansions, not to please the people who once hurt me. I began to feel the true value of peace. Early morning walks in the forest, boots crunching on fallen leaves, listening to sparrows chirping overhead. I would stop beside an ancient pine, touch its rough bark, and think, this is living. No need for praise, no need for likes on social media, just a heart at rest. Kindness became clearer than ever. In Willow Creek, people live slowly and help one another without keeping score. My neighbor Martha, a widow in her 60s, brings me a basket of fresh eggs every week, smiling. Teacher Westfall, eat up and stay strong. I return the favor by fixing her wooden fence or tutoring her son in tough math problems. No one asks about my past. No one pries. They are kind simply because that's how life is here, and I learned to follow, staying after school to help struggling students, never charging for extra lessons, visiting Principal Harlan when he was sick, bringing homemade vegetable soup. Every act of kindness makes me feel closer to Grandma. She used to say, kindness isn't given to get something back. It's given so your own heart feels lighter. A life without striving is the greatest gift. In Aurora, I used to stay up late grading papers just to be called an outstanding teacher, worrying about raises and colleagues' expectations. Now in Willow Creek, I teach because I love it, not for promotion. The pay is lower, but it's enough. I no longer have to please anyone. No more pleading calls from Mom. Just share a little, son. No more resentful posts from Zach. I live for myself, and that has made me stronger than ever. I gradually realized that the greatest victory wasn't the $5 million or winning the lawsuit. Money is just money. It freed me from financial worry, but it couldn't heal my soul. The trial was only a legal battle where I defended Grandma's final wish, but it didn't erase the scars inside. The real victory was rising above those wounds. The wounds from my father's curses, from Zach's envious glares, from the toxic weight of a family that once made me doubt myself. I used to think I was alone, betrayed, but now I see it was a lesson. Family isn't always a shelter. Sometimes they are heavy expectations, invisible ropes tying you to a life they want for you. I cut those ropes, and now I am free. That evening, after a simple dinner, grilled meat and vegetables from my own garden, I sat by the fireplace, the flames crackling like Grandma's soft laughter. I opened my brown leather journal, bought at the local market, thick, rough pages, and took a pencil. The firelight flickered across the paper. My hand trembled slightly with emotion. I wrote a sentence I knew would stay with me for the rest of my life. Grandma's love saved my life. The real victory is not how much money you have, but knowing how to live a decent, peaceful life that is true to your own heart. I closed the journal, set it on the wooden table, and watched the fire burn. Tears fell, but they were no longer tears of pain. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude to Grandma for giving me her final lesson. True love means letting go, means letting your grandchildren fly. And so my journey ends, not with revenge, but with growth, peace, and the greatest lesson of all. I once believed family was everything, an unconditional refuge. But through those months of chaos, I learned. Some families are born to love us, like Grandma, who spent her whole life saving not just money but boundless love. And some families are born to teach us how to stand up and walk away, like my parents, my brother, my aunt and uncle, who pushed me into pain so I could learn to heal myself, to become strong on my own. I stood up, turned off the light, and stepped out onto the porch. The Montana night sky glittered with stars, the cold wind carried the scent of fresh pine. I looked up and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma. I'm truly living now." And I knew from this day forward I would live fully. Not for anyone else, but for myself and for the love she left behind.